Okay, good morning, good afternoon, Year 11. This is Mr. Morgan.
And Mr. Morgan.
Great. We're continuing with our kind of revision videos, kind of overseeing the different set work. Today we'll be looking at Star Wars. Star Wars is composed by John Williams. John Williams is
an incredibly famous film composer who wrote not only the music for Star Wars, but also films like Jaws, Indiana Jones, Harry Potter, Jurassic Park. He is one of the most famous film composers of all time.
So, first of all, before we go into the film, there are two types of music or styles of music we hear normally during films. That is diegetic music. Diegetic music is music that the characters can hear in the scene. So it's music that's happening in the environment that they are in. And then we have non-diegetic music. That is music also known as underscoring, which is the music that's kind of just underneath throughout the film.
Yeah, so that actually brings us on to how this piece of music is structured. The first part, which is the main theme, this is when the credits are coming up on the screen, is in a very recognizable musical structure of A-A-B-A. When the credits finish and the action on the film starts, the music then starts just following the narrative of the action that's happening, and therefore the structure becomes much more through composed, and it's just being written to react to what's happening in the screen, and it's not so recognizable in a way of analyzing it for structure.
Okay, so it begins with A-A-B-A and then follows the scene. The meter, it is in 4/4 at the start, comes in very kind of march-like, really represents the kind of military-esque element of Star Wars. And at the very end, from about bar 44, from exactly bar 44, it changes into 3/4, so it goes into triplet time at the end.
Yeah, this beginning part, as Mr. Morgan's just mentioned there, about the military-esque fashion, it's worth pointing out that the beginning is like a fanfare. This is a very important aspect to remember about this piece. A fanfare is normally a ceremonial piece of music played by brass instruments, and it's normally to introduce or open a ceremony or to introduce a particular strong character in this case.
Fantastic. So we have the opening, the meters. So let's talk about the texture. So the texture is mainly melody-dominated homophony. So homophonic throughout from most of the parts, kind of definitely always following a main theme. Now, look, the texture is very thick for most of the song. John Williams had most of the instruments playing for most of the time. It's very dense, thick writing. There's only one really notable immediate change where we get our solo piccolo.
Yeah. The tonality, again, is very, very clear. It's B-flat major from bars 1 to 29. However, what does start to happen is as the piece goes on, it becomes slightly less clear. From about bar 36 in your piece, it's sort of found its way into C major. And certainly by the very end of the piece, it's actually becoming much more ambiguous, and there are actually moments where there are two keys sort of playing at the same time, and we refer to that as bitonality. So we know the texture, the structure, the meter, instrumentation. Yeah, the instrumentation is a symphony orchestra, rather unusual actually for the time. This was in the 70s when this film came out. Sci-fi was a big thing, people using lots of synthesized sounds to try and make it sound otherworldly, and then John Williams turns up and then just writes this piece of music for a symphony orchestra, very standard sort of classical group.
Absolutely. So in the late Romantic era, these orchestras are getting massive. A symphony orchestra can have upwards of 60 performers playing in the group. The four groups that we hear in this performance are the strings, the brass, the woodwind, and percussion. So they're the four families of instruments. I think the full list of every instrument that's playing in this piece will be above our head. Okay, brilliant. So now we know what instrumentation we're hearing in Star Wars. We're now going to talk about some of the harmony that John Williams uses and a couple of other little devices. The first thing we're going to talk about, this actually comes back to texture a little bit, lots of pedal notes. So a pedal note is when we get a note that's kind of held or sustained, underneath the music. So we get some dominant pedals within this performance, and also, very interestingly, at the beginning in the introduction, we get an inverted tonic pedal.
That means that the tonic pedal is actually happening at the top of the sound. In this case, it's actually the strings doing that while the fanfare is being played on the brass.
Absolutely. Tonic means the first note of the scale, so instead of being underneath, it is at the top.
Yeah. So also, harmonically, there are two things that we need to think about in terms of how some of the chords are made up. First of all, there's a lot of added sixths into some of the chords, and then there's also what we would refer to as a Neapolitan chord, which creates a bit of a clash. This is when the supertonic note, which is the second note of your scale, is flattened, and then the chord from that is made up as a major triad, but still being played over the tonic.
So, example. So if I play the note C, that's our tonic note.
Yeah, your supertonic is the next note in the scale, which is a D.
You flatten that so it becomes a D flat.
You then make up a D flat triad.
That goes above.
But you then still have the C playing underneath it.
Perfect. And that particularly prevalent at the end of the performance.
Yeah, and the last thing before we hear the music is the use of quartile harmony. And this is when a lot of the chords are built up with fourth intervals stacking on top of each other, and that gets used throughout this piece.
Yeah, and also very notable that in the introduction, particularly in the way that the brass is harmonized. We're going to, as all of our other videos, watch the score through now and do a little bit of a deeper analysis. Opens very, very loud, fortissimo fanfare brass with quartile harmony.
Still got the inverted pedal happening in the strings.
Good, we hear the main section A, the main leitmotif, the hero leitmotif.
When the A section returns, there is a different accompaniment and a descending bass line.
Okay, as we move into section B, we hear that the melody is played in octaves.
There's been a drop in the dynamics. There is this dominant pedal, but still with quartile harmony. It's starting to get louder towards the end of section B.
Okay, we get this dotted rhythms really pushing, accenting the rhythm. Contrary motion, the parts are coming together.
Use of extended chords. We see dominant seventh chords. There's a little rit and a slowdown before the main theme returns in octaves.
Okay, notice the first two notes of that main theme, our leitmotif hero theme, are a fifth apart.
And there's some use of chromatic notes and a harp gliss at the end to take us into the new part.
Okay, so this is a little link passage just as we're coming in. We get this nice build of texture. We're getting sextuplets in the violins.
The harmony is very uncertain now. We've got use of augmented chords.
Now, as we move into this Rebel Blockade theme, another leitmotif, we hear this solo piccolo, much quieter.
Okay, we've got staccato in a lot of the parts now, very short, quick notes, and there's a massive crescendo.
Okay, whole section come in, we've moved into 3/4, change of meter, accented rhythms, but it is starting to slow down. Okay, we're now much faster, repeated ostinato with that C pedal in the bass.
And our Neapolitan chords, where we have a D flat triad over the C in the bass.